Well, welcome back. This is the last lecture, as you may already know, and before the beginning of the spring break. So the next time we meet after this lecture, the next time after this will be after the spring break. So I hope you take care of yourself while you're at the spring break and you're healthy and enjoy yourself. So now we're going into talking about petroleum agreements as we do every Friday. And tomorrow, your spring break, in a way, starts. It normally typically says Monday, but tomorrow is Saturday weekend. So for all practical purposes, you got spring starting as soon as I finish my lecture. So I can imagine I'm not welcome at this time by you because I'm the hurdle between starting the spring and I'm in the middle. So I'm the least desirable person as far as you're concerned. So the sooner I get out of your way, and the sooner the spring break will start. So let's see if you can get going on this lecture so that you can start your spring break. I don't know if I'll cover, I will cover all of them. Part two, which is the one we're doing now. You know, there are 4 parts to this course. The first one, as a reminder, is the definition of terms, so on, the language of agreements. The second part is what we are talking about now, are the various kinds of agreements, which I hope to finish second part, various types of agreements today. And it's a very perfect timing. So when we meet again, we can start with part 3. So that's, in that way, it turned out to be just the right timing. And part 3, as I've said on a number of occasions previously, deals with legislative and policy questions. And this is the time when I'll circle the globe and talk about Colombia and Norway and the United States and China and so on and so forth. Okay? Policy questions are coming. It's a particularly interesting part that I like to teach. And I hope you will enjoy listening to me. And at the end of this, the fundamental question we will address is, at the end of part 3, is how do we know we have a good agreement? There is nobody who has developed that yardstick, the measure. How do we find out if we have a good agreement? And then we come into what is a good agreement, of course, is one good for both sides. So that will be the reward at the end of part 3, which we will start a week on the Monday after the spring break, okay? What else? After part 3, we'll move on to the 4th part, and the last part is negotiations. So we'll leave all the conversation about negotiations towards the end, and I may just give some ideas how I would do negotiations if I were you. There is no formula for it. There is no plus and minus. It's just an impression. It's qualitative versus quantitative lecture. You just talk about general things. It's not like I'm right and somebody's wrong. It's just a way, an approach to what one would do versus somebody else would do, okay? So that's the agenda. Now I'm taking you all to the end of the course for this semester, and including the end of the course for this semester. Now, having said that, a reminder is, when we started this part, now I'm on this part now, starting the lecture now, fresh. Today's lecture is that I listed 4, and on more than one occasion, I've listed 4 different types of agreements that I know of exist around the world. And we've covered one is concession, the oldest kind. And you might have been surprised when I said the developed countries have concession in the agreements, the developing countries, not all. And many of them have PSAs, and then we discuss what is good or bad for government versus the company. That's history, we've done it. And we finished off by looking at 2 cash flows, okay? And give me 1 second, please. I need to talk about an attachment. So let me confer with somebody who helps me with the attachment. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, I need to check one thing. Okay, please. Okay, now I'm back. If you remember that in the last lecture on agreements on this course, we had sent attachments. One based on a cash flow for a concession, and the second was an attachment based on a cash flow for a PSA, production sharing agreements. And we covered both of them. And I went through column A, B, C, D, E. This time, and there was a third one, which we did not cover. That was that 1, 2, and the third part, the third handout there was there sent to you. It's in your file, which we did not get the time to cover as joint ventures, JOA, joint operating agreements or joint ventures. So now, with this lecture, we're going to, either you can go back to the old lecture and take out joint venture agreement, JOA, from there and follow that attachment with today's lecture. And if I remember correctly, we may send it again, all of those 3 attachments today, so that you have them also on joint venture. You will probably have them again today, in addition to the concession of PSC, but that you already have before. So to be on the safe side, we might as well put all 3 again for today lecture. And just a little bit of clarity here. The reason I'm saying that is so open up as I start now, and the forward, the attachment, the handout, and that deals with joint venture or joint operating agreements. Okay, that should be with you. There should be several pages of it. And I'm going to cover it directly from there because I do have the same. Look at it, exactly what you have in your file with you as an attachment. So I'm going to cover it myself, and then they will see how I explain that. Okay. The first question is the third type of agreement, joint ventures. What is a joint venture? Very simple. A joint venture is a partnership. And if you say, what is a partnership? The partnership shares in the risks and the rewards. That's all. Now, it's a partner. Most projects these days, as you may know already, are going farther into the sea and going deeper into the sea and also on land. They're going into thousands of feet deeper now because the accessibility and in going into remote areas is getting more and more difficult to hydrocarbons. So it's costing a lot more now than what it was in the past. And therefore, there is an enormous risk involved. And there's a lot of need for capital, money to drill a well. So most of the projects now are joint ventures, okay? For the reasons I've just given you. These joint ventures are governed under an agreement. How is everybody going to work? There are 4 partners, and how are they going to work as a joint venture, as one? So there has to be some working relationship of the four partners, how they're going to implement the project. So that brings up the question of JOA. JOA is Joint Operating Agreement. So I might sometimes just say JOA, and sometimes I might say Joint Venture Agreement, or Joint Operating Agreement is the same thing. So then the question, define a JOA, and it says there, after you look at the notes, and I'm going to put them in front of me. The first line says, it says key provisions of joint operating agreements. So that means what is contained in the joint operating agreement, joint venture agreement, what is contained, what makes a joint venture agreement? They're generally thick documents. I've reduced it to just a few points, and just to touch on those points, so you have some idea what is a JOA. Out of those very few points that I'm going to pick, just very few out of those few points, maybe 6 or 7, and that is going to tell us, which I will discuss in a little more detail. Give me a second, let me get something to wipe myself with. Okay, back. Let's read it off of the document you have in an attachment in front of you. Key provisions of joint operating agreement. The next line says a joint venture agreement establishes the working relationship between the IOC and the NOC, I meaning international company, and meaning national oil company. How are they going to work together to implement the project, to operate the project? At times in this lecture, I will talk about some of my personal experiences in joint ventures, where I was representing one company, and how did we work out our relationship. So there'll be my own personal experience will come into play also, and I'll give you the details as we go. So let's start, obviously, as I've said many, many times, in every agreement, first thing is definition, define the terms of the agreement. We started the course by that. We define the terms that are used in agreement. We gave you 20 different terms, carried interest, farm in, farm out. They have to be defined. So every agreement, including JOA, will have those terms defined. And the definition is such as, what is a commercial discovery? What do we mean by gross negligence? And all these are defined there, and many, many more. That's the first order of business in a JOA. Some of these points, for example, the next one do not need much explaining, so I'll just read it and then go on to the next one. An effective date and term of the contract or agreement. How long? When does the contract start? When does it run? How long does it run? When does it terminate? Do I have to spend half an hour explaining that simple thing? No, I hope not. So let's move on. Participating interest. Please pay extra attention to this. In every joint venture, there are references to participating interest in every one of them. Number one, it says, what is the working interest? And I put an arrow, WI. What is the net revenue interest? I put an arrow, NRI. Trust me, there's so much confusion about WI and NRI. It's pathetic. It's so simple. When people are talking about NRI, they're referred to as a WI. And I said, no, it's not, it's NRI. So what I'm trying to say is, you would be surprised there is so much confusion about it. It's the simplest thing to explain. And you will be involved if you're in this business in joint venture agreement. I guarantee you that, because all of these agreements have both a reference to WI and NRI. So let me write it on, make it very clear to you. What is a WI and what is a NRI? Let me write it on, please. Word working interest means who's paying for it, the cost. It's called interest meaning share. Working means cost or expenditure. Cost or expenditure. If you see the joint venture agreement says WI is 75% for this company, just an example, that means the company is responsible for how much? Only 75% of the cost. Their share is only 75% of the cost. Now let's talk about NRA. Same as before, the word interest means share. Well, I don't have to spell it with net revenue. NRM means sharing of the revenues. Let me give you an example or two examples, it will become clear. The company X is in a joint venture and the working interest is 75%, and the net revenue is 50%. It doesn't have to be the same as the working interest percentage. That means the company will pay 75% of the cost, but when they start receiving the revenue, they will only get 50% of the revenue from the project. Somebody else will get 25%. Maybe the government will get 25% of the revenue, and government not pay anything towards the cost. Give you an example. So that will make it very clear. There was a problem, still is. It was called ACT. Let's write it down. This is the real project, offshore China. Working interest was one third, and 1/4, and 1/3. But the ACT stands for A is for Agip, AGIP. That's an Italian national oil company, very large, very, very big, all over the world, one of the biggest in the world, Agip. Okay. Now it's referred to as ENI. That is an Italian name. I would not want to spell it out. It's a difficult Italian name. It used to be called Agip. I've lectured there for 31 years now, every year, 6-7 times. go to Europe, they're in Milan and Rome. C is Chevron, and T is Texaco. These three companies got together with a working interest. They would pay cost 1/3, each party would pay 1/3 of the cost. Let's talk with the NRI in this case. NRI, sharing of the revenues. So Ajib, Chevron, each pays 1/3 of the cost. Now comes the revenue, $100. Each one gets 1/4, 1/4 of the 1/4 revenue. And you see there's another 1/4, and there's a C on top of it. I put a circle, that's the government of China. So the same, what is the working interest of the government of China is 0. So what? The government of China does not pay anything about the cost, but they get 25% of the revenue. And after the government of China joined them and they started getting the revenue, the same project would then call CACT, China or Chinese government, Ajib, Chevron, Texaco. So I hope you understand the difference between working interest and net revenue interest. I'll let it be for a minute, so let it digest now. So they all put in 1/3 of the cost and they receive 1/4 of the revenues. Okay. Fine. But people do confuse themselves. Let's turn the page. Next, operator. In this case, the three companies. So the three companies collectively, Ajib, Chevron, Texaco. Chevron and Texaco, when this project started, were two separate companies. Now they're one company called Chevron Texaco. We know that. But this project was long, long ago. At that time, there were Chevron, Texaco, but two separate companies. Question is, who's going to run the project? Who's going to hire the geologists? Who's going to hire the engineers? Who's going to pay the engineers? Who's going to get the drilling people? Who's going to get the ships there? It's offshore. Who's going to do the pipeline? Who's going to dispose of the oil? A million questions about the project. So the partners, in this case three, collectively sit down and decide we'll take a vote. We will appoint one company as the operator. Let's say they decided Chevron will be the operator. In other words, all the questions that I just raised about, when we'll start the drilling, workover problem, drilling, and so on. I've just gone through the list. I don't have to go through it again. Everything will be handled by Chevron. They are the operator. And of course, the others will pay accordingly their share of it. But the final running of the show will be with Chevron because they have all agree with the Chevron is the person or the company. This is what it says, operator. The agreement, JO, identifies the operator and what his duties are. Just what I said, what are the duties? What are the notice provisions? I'll explain that. Is it when you send it or when I receive it? Give you an example. The operator, in this case Chevron, has to send notices and keep the other updated, two partners updated constantly. So that's called notices. One of the notices that'll go out would be to the other two partners by Chevron that by Friday, pick a date, we want you, the other partners, to pay their share of the workover. The share of the workover is $2 million each. So by then, Friday, the other partners, including Chevron, must come up with $2 million each. So that's a notice. So question, what are the notice provisions? Is it when you send it or when I receive it? Very important, very important. Chevron can say that I sent you the notice on Monday, my job is over. Is it when I send it? Or when you receive it? You other two members, Ajib and Texas, you received it on Saturday. That's not my problem. I have done my job. I sent it and put it in the mail on Monday. But after that, it's between you and the US Postal Service. I have nothing to do with those guys. So that is the point. I sent it. So you have to, what are the notices? Is it when you send the notice that I have to say, well, I'll abide by what your request is about $2 million? Or when you receive it? This can be a very serious matter. For example, if Friday happens to be the payday for the workers, and when they receive the pay, they send the rent payment, the car payments, and all credit card payments, realizing that they'll get paid on Friday. What if the partners did not get the notice till Saturday? So how can this give the money to the operator on Friday? So what if no worker gets paid? Are they happy? The worker? No, they're going to be very upset. It's going to ruin the credit history, which is a serious business in America. You may know that. So all this has to be clearly spelled out, defined in agreements. What are the notice provisions? Is it when you send it or when I receive it? So the point being, things might look okay sitting in this comfortable seat where you're sitting. But sometimes even simple thing in reality can become very complicated, as I have given you the example. So it has to be clearly laid down. Let's move on. Operating committee. Typically, if there are 3 companies, then each company will be asked to send a representative to what they call a committee, the operating committee. That committee is represented by each company. There'll be 3 members in this case, 1 member per vote, over 1 vote per member, and they collectively come up with decisions. And their decisions are binding on the operator. Operator doesn't just go do whatever he wants to. He has to get the permission of the other 2 members. That is called the operating committee of 3 members. Chevron being one of them. Let me read it to you now. This committee consists of individuals that meet quarterly and are responsible for establishing the budget and etc. Well, you can meet every week, you can meet every 3 months, you can meet, it's up to the committee to decide. Let me tell you my own story. In the 70s, 40 years or more, 40 years back, I was serving on the committee. I was representing one company called the Austin Electric Utility. It was a power generation. The same thing as in oil, it's a power generation. The agreement of joint venture are the same. So I represented the Austin Electric, and there were 3 other companies, a total of 4, on the committee of this project. And this project, believe me, is still the largest nuclear project in the world. Big. If you know electric power, there were 2 units, and there are 2. Each unit is made of 1250 megawatt. That's big. Biggest project. So I've been there, done it, seen it myself in committees. It was so big a project that we did not decide to meet every 3 months. We 4 members of the committee decided to meet every week. Because so much going on. It's the biggest project in the world. Power. On the side, I'll say the 4 companies were from Austin, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, and Houston. They had the name, Corpus Christi called Central Power and Light, Houston we call Houston Lighting and Power, San Antonio Electric Board. So that's not about the 4 different cities. So we, as a committee, decided it'll be very boring to go every week and fly to all 4 cities every week. One day, fly to the same city every week. The operator was the one who was calling the meeting. So we said, every week we'll switch cities. One week we'll go to Austin, where I was the host. Next week we'll go to Corpus, where I was the guest, and 2 others were guests. So we would rotate. The city where we would, they played the host, and the other 3 were the guests, just to make it a little different. It gets boring. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is we decided we'll meet every week. Okay? And the operating committee's powers are defined, of course. Where are the meetings going to be held? I just explained to you. We said, well, we'll meet 4 different cities. We decided, and nobody objected, that's fine. Next item, you may have it yellow on your handout. Pay extra attention to the yellow part, but I'll read both parts. Work programs and budgets are established by the committee. That's money, capital, dinero. This is a central issue. Everything comes back to capital money. Work program, I think I've explained to you what are the members of the, what are the companies obliged to do? That's what it is. We've talked about it. I look up your notes. And the definitions, there was a definition of work program. What are the parties going to do, and when are they going to do? If it's a national, what is the national oil company going to do? What is the international oil company going to do? Define. But the next item is more important than the first 2. The first one. And I'll explain that. What happens in the case of over expenditures? What happens in the case of over expenditures, i.e., that is, beyond AFE? AFE, in parentheses, defines authority for expenditures. AFE. Let's talk about AFE. You will be dealing with AFEs if you're ever working in any oil companies and in a committee. Now the explanation, what is the AFE? You will be hearing about it when you're in real life. Authority to spend, permission to spend. That's what it means. The operating committee gives the permission to the operator to, in order to drill this well, we will have to give you a permission. So you have to come to us, we'll give you the permission, and that permission is called AFE. So you cannot start drilling unless we have issued you a AFE. It says here, what if the three members in this case, and let's say I'm one of them, allow the operator to spend $10 million to drill a well. So he can permission. I'm one of the members of the committee. And let me make a scenario for you, an interesting scenario. Before I give the permission, the operator has to, I and the committee, has to come before the committee and explain to the committee and that maybe the structure, where they're going to drill to, the depth, the logistics, why is it going to cost $10 million, how deep is it going to be, and so on and so forth. And at that time, the operator said to us, the committee, that please issue an AFE for $10 million to drill the well. And here are the reasons why I'm asking $10 million. This is the level that this is the drilling that's going to happen. And we're going to go find oil at a depth of 11,000 feet. Okay, fine. You like it? Start. Now, a critical situation happens. Listen carefully. The operator, in this case, let us say Chevron, and I'm a member of the committee, I'm from Egypt, and there's a Texaco there, issued a $10 million to Chevron to go drill. Because Chevron assured us there is going to be oil at that point. Hey, good, let's start. At 10,000 feet. So when the drilling bit reaches 10,000 feet, there is no oil. No oil at all. Now what happens? All the money, $10 million that we had authorized to the Chevron for the operator has been spent. No oil. So what is Chevron going to say? He's going to call the geologist and ask the geologist to explain. You said, geologist, there's going to be oil and there's no oil, and now what do? I don't know, there any money left. And the geologists say, you know what? And then Chevron said, I'm going to kill you, man. You put me into such a terrible situation. So the geologist says, well, please, sir, don't kill me because I've got 3 children and they're very young and all that. Sympathy. The geologist says, I'm a geologist also, by the way. And he says, you know, the dip of the strata, dip. Oh, this way or that way. The slant of the strata is the formation, which has the oil. Oh, well, we thought it'll be going gradually, but it turned out to be going deeper very fast. So therefore, you'll have to go another 4,000 feet after 10,000, there's no oil, to get to the strata which has the oil. So now you have to go what? Another, 4,000 feet. And the geologist, because of the geology and all the fancy things he talks about, formation and strata, and traps and stratigraphic, which is structure, he throws in a lot of jargon, a lot of words to explain why he thinks there'll be oil after another 4,000 feet at a depth of 14,000 feet. And for that, the money, of course, has been spent, and he needs another what? He needs maybe, it's getting deeper and deeper, so the cost is going to be more, because of the drill time and all, pulling all the drill pipes and putting it back, putting the tip, bits, corners, all of this stuff. He said, well, I'll need another $6 million, additional to the 10 million which has been spent. Now to go. Tell me, please. That's the whole story is to ask this question. What is the AFE? $10 million, permission given by the committee. Now he's asking to spend more. The Chevron is saying, give me $6 million more. If beyond, it says, what happens in the case of more than the AFE? What happened now? Who should pay? I want you to think about it. It's a very serious question. $6 million, not a few pennies. Question is, should all the three members now together pay their share, ACT, or should the operator pay? Only the operator, depending who should pay the $6 million. When I go around the world and I ask this question, almost 90% say all members of the committee should be, all companies in the venture should pay, almost everybody, all. Then it comes to me. Ajib, if I'm Ajib. What do you think, Dr. Malik? Who should pay? I'm the representative for Ajib. I say, hey, forget all. Before you get 1 cent from me, that's what I'm talking about to the operator. It'll be over my dead body. It will be over my dead body. What does that mean in America? It's an English expression, American. To get $10 million from me, no, the 6 million, the extra 6 million, you'll have to kill me first. Over my dead body, you'll take that money. I'm not going to give you. This is what others will say, everybody, and I'm saying, no, I'm not giving. Let it sink in. Let it go in, because I'm going to explain. Why did I say not, I'm not giving? No matter what others say, that's their business. They can give, I'm not giving my share, additional. Because I talked to the operator Chevron. I said, Mr. Chevron, when we, the three members, were talking about appointing an operator, you, Chevron, were bragging about what a great guy you are. You have the experience, you have the knowledge, you can do better things than anybody in the world. And therefore, you should be the man in charge. You should be the one in charge of running the project. It should be your project then. You wanted it. You were bragging, you had the knowledge and the experienced people and the engineers and the geologists and the geophysicists and everybody was best in your company. And I will tell him, I believe your lies. You were the best. Because what? No, prove. You want say, okay, we say you're the best, go do it now. So my question, Chevron, is who did you hire? Did I hire the people at the drilling site? No, you did. The drilling engineer you hired was your brother-in-law. Yes, he was selling hamburger in McDonald's because you got a useless guy. Am I going to pay for his mistakes? Give me a second, please. Very good, very good. I'm busy for 1 hour. Very good. Thank you. Very good. Okay. Forgive me for this disturbance. I'm back. So that's the point. Am I going to pay because you hired your brother-in-law preparing hamburgers? You didn't hire the right guys. The geologist or somebody else, same thing. What was he doing? He was selling shoes at some shoe shop or something like that. He was not the person you said he was the great geophysicist. You say you had the best. No, okay, no, I'm not going to pay for your bad decisions. No, don't come to me. That happens in real life. And I'll give you later on an example of that. In real life, what happened in our case. This is our project, but this is next, after another 10 minutes, I'm going to get there again. Don't forget this project, we're not finished. Let's turn the page. Oh, next, reading from here. Operations by less than all. Who decides to drill deeper than the target depth and who pays? I've just explained that. Default. Suppose a party in the joint venture refuses to pay, the 3 members. What do you do? What are the remedies? How do you fix it? Is it through arbitration? Is it through court of law? And the other ways to do it? You have to write it down. I'm going to talk about dispute resolution. In this class, we will talk about, after I finish all of these other things like part 3. At the end of part 3, before negotiation, I get into miscellaneous subject, different subject that did not make up the first 3 parts, but what left out at the end, which I will cover, to fill in the gaps. How do you settle disputes? So that is the point. Who decides to drill deeper than the target depth and who pays? Suppose if one doesn't pay, how do you fix that? We're going to talk about that. Pay extra attention to the next item, please. Disposition of production. Read it. There's one arrow there. I'll talk about that arrow. What comes under disposition of production? This includes provisions whether the payment is in kind or in cash. Let's say there's a royalty payment to the government. And then you have to ask the government, Mr. Government, do you want this royalty in kind, as oil? I'll bring oil to your office, or do you want it in cash? Or do you want to say, well, sell the oil? I don't want oil, I want cash. Tell us. It establishes delivery point. Where do you want the oil? In your office or somewhere in the refinery? These are simple things, but these have to be defined. I don't know. I bring a barrel in the office, so what do I do with it? The next item is super important. When does the title get transferred? I repeat it again. When does the title get transferred? Title of what? Title of the oil. Is it my oil? Is it your oil? Is it his oil? You have to start. Now let's talk about it. Basic. When does the title get? What does title mean? Title establishes ownership. You get stopped driving a car, the first thing the police officer is going to ask is, Mr. So-and-so, can I see the title to this car? That means, show me the title. That means you're the owner of this car. You have not stolen the car. I want to see the proof. Proof is established through the title. When does the title get transferred? Meaning what? What does ownership mean? What does it imply? Ownership implies liability. If it's my car, I'm driving, I hit somebody else, I'm liable to fix the other guy's car. Very important. Now, let me give you an example how important it is. This is super important. You may have read in some oil history book on oil about an oil spill called the Valdez. V as in Victor, A, L as in London, D as in David, E, Z, zebra. Valdez oil spill, very famous in the oil business. Very famous. Why is it famous? Valdez oil spill. And I believe it was Exxon. For that oil spill, it cost Exxon billions, B with a billion, billions, 190 billions of dollars penalty. One oil, billions. What happened? Let me explain what. In Alaska, while the production has come down a great deal now, it was a very big producer, Alaska. And the oil field was called Prudhoe Bay, Prudhoe, P-R-U-D, I think H-E-Y or something like that, Prudhoe Bay. The oil in Alaska is in the north, and Alaska is the biggest state in the Union. It's bigger than Texas, by the way. So the oil discovery, this field, is in the topmost part, top of of Alaska, and it's all snow and ice and all that stuff, the northern limit. And the oil from the north of Alaska had to be transported by pipeline. There's a pipeline from the north, several hundred miles long, all the way to the south port in Alaska. The port where oil had to be transported to and put in the ship's cargo vessel was through a pipeline. It was brought to the south because in the south, there was no snow. The ships could be loaded with oil. Okay? So the oil had to go from the north, had to come from north all the way to the south, which is a long way south. And once it arrived at the port in south, we get up in the north, it's all frozen. It could be loaded, put into the ships. Okay. And guess what? After the ship was, the cargo was oil put in the ship, called Valdez, V-A-L-D. And it the ship was from the south of was then to sail to further south to California to go to the refineries. The oil went to the refineries in California, another couple of thousand miles. First the pipeline, then the cargo goes on the ship, and then it goes to California, where it is unloaded, and then it goes to the refinery. I hope you understand that. And guess what happened? The Valdez off the coast of Alaska ran aground. It touched the bottom of the sea because maybe the captain had no idea what he was doing. He was drunk. I had to have no idea what happened. But the fact that an accident happened. As a result, aground meant it touched the bottom of the sea. There was a big rupture, big hole in the Valdez, and hundreds of thousands of oil were spilled into the Gulf of Alaska, Bay of Alaska, whatever that is called. That was it. So the case went to the judges, and they gave a penalty to Exxon because Exxon was the owner. That's the point. They had the title to clean up the mess they have created in Alaska, clean it up. And then they said, for 150 years or 200 years, there'll be no fishing here because the fish are not going to are dead, and no new fish are going to come there or hatch their eggs. So look at all the families and the livelihood and source of income that Alaskans are going to lose for the next 100 years. Add that up, and that comes to this amount. And then you have to clean it up, and every rock had to be lifted and cleaned. It cost the Exxon several $1 billion to do all that and to pay the punitive damages. Why Exxon? Because they were the owner. They had the title to the vessel. So therefore, in any operating agreement, you have to establish This is the point where I own the oil. This is the point where you own the oil. It's going to be clearly there. 3 o'clock I own it, 4 o'clock you own it. Whatever way you establish is up to you. So it has to be clearly defined. Nomination of production level, how much oil is going to be produced. Sometimes they say cut down the production for 100 reasons. What about underlifting and overlifting? That is the tanker did not arrive. For example, well, the tanker has a schedule. Oil is coming from the field. What happens? And they're producing it. And the storage at the port is full. And suddenly you find out the tanker that was supposed to come and take the oil from the port didn't make it there on time. Maybe there are 10 reasons. And there were storms on the way and the ship didn't come on time. Well, that was an accident. There could be 100 reasons. The ship did not arrive on time. What happens? The oil is being produced or is in storage is full. There's going to be sort of a serious problem there, right? So all these and many, 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 many more factors are to consider in the joint operating agreement, just to get a sampling of this. Abandonment of wells. When you think abandon the well, a procedure for abandonment of wells has to be established. Don't have to explain it. Surrender, extension, and renewals. In the joint venture contract, there has to be a notice provision. You have to have in the agreement, you have to say, there has to be noted for the above item, for example, at some point, the concession, in this case, meaning the license, has to be. So question is, if you can relinquish, give up, walk away from the license, exploration license. So what's the procedure for it? Or you want to renew it? What's the procedure? If you want to extend it, what's the procedure? Has to be laid down. Simple. Doesn't explain it. Transfer of rights with transfer of interest. We've done that already. I've already explained. I'll explain it to you when we did it. What rights and obligations go with the transfer of interest, that is working interest? No. You can sell your working interest to somebody. You can remember this when we did it? It's not sell or bring somebody else in your place. Farm in and farm out. Remember? Transfer your responsibility to somebody else. Remember we talked about it? Then the question comes in and we talk about the next item. Does the new party, company coming in, farming in, share only the new problems or the old ones also? I spent a fair amount of time explaining that and I shall not do it again now. Withdrawal from the agreement. A sufficient notice has to be given. 180 days, just an example, that a party is withdrawing from the agreement. You have to tell the government, that we're withdrawing. Is it withdrawing from the part of the agreement or all of the agreement? Whether it is withdrawing from the entire deal or part of it. Let's turn the page, please. Relationship of parties and payment of taxes. Relationship of parties and payment of taxes. Can I tell the government that you will pay my taxes? You pay your own taxes. That's it. That's what it means. There are certain taxes that the individual company pays. But the other kinds of taxes that are a joint responsibility of the venture or made up of 3 companies. I'll explain, it says it clearly, very simple. Certain responsibilities of the parties are an individual responsibility and not a joint responsibility. Paying taxes is an individual responsibility. Each company will pay its own taxes, corporate taxes. Each pays its own. But there are some responsibilities that are joint responsibility. For example, joint venture of 3 companies is producing oil, and the royalty goes to the government immediately. So the joint venture, collectively, the three companies will send 10% oil to the government or in cash. That royalty. The oil royalty becomes the joint responsibility, the project made up of three parties. Corporate tax becomes the individual responsibility of all individual companies. Confidential information, proprietary technology. All kinds of information during the process of exploration and drilling and production and everything else. Automatically, one copy goes to the government. All information. It has to go to the government. The question is, should the government advertise the information? Should the government put it on television and say, this is the information? No. Cannot, will not, shall not. Because that information that is going to the government is confidential information. You will not divulge it. For how long? Forever? No. Industry practices, between 2 and 5 years, the government is not supposed to disclose to others what you have sent as confidential information. I'll read it. Confidential information, proprietary technology. The international oil company has to give the information to the host government, I just told you, and proprietary technology should be kept confidential. Generally, the information is kept confidential for the term of the contract or for 2 to 5 years after the expiration. Next one, force majeure. It's a French word. It's included in just about every agreement type. Force majeure, I'm not French. Force majeure, if you want to sound with a nasal sound, maybe French. Act of God. There's certain things that is an act of God. You can plead that. It's an act of earthquake, hurricane. Not my doing, it's not you, it's an act of God. So the point here is, if for some reason a certain aspect of the agreement cannot be fulfilled, sometimes maybe the operator say, well, I'm sorry, I'm very sorry, I can't do it because it's not my fault. It's happened. There was a hurricane and it blew up the offshore platform, and what could I do? In that case, the judge decides, but not always the judge accepts that. You know, I could go into a long discussion about a situation where it's a judgment call from the judge, where the petitioner, one of the accused parties, called it a force majeure, it's an act of God. The judge said, no, no, it's not an act of God. It's a long story, why take your time? So that's that, force majeure. This is a provision in all contracts. It is defined as beyond reasonable control or acts of God, for example, storm, earthquake, etc. Okay. Notices. Well, I explained that to you earlier also. These should be in writing. You know, remember the operator has to send notices, and the delivery of the notice should be upon it receipt. Okay. The notice will consider delivered when I receive it, not when you put it in the mail. Final page. Applicable law and arbitration. Establish a dispute will be, how the dispute will be settled. I'm going to, as I said earlier, I'm going to talk about that. under dispute settlement. How are you going to settle your disputes? For example, whether it is through arbitration, and arbitration is a method, not another. There are several. How to settle disputes. We'll talk about two kinds of disputes. Between companies. Let's say there are three partners and they have a problem. Or it could be territorial dispute across territory. This country said, this is my territory, get out of here. And they said, no, this is my territory, you get out of here. And we've got examples with Mexico and America. We have settled it. I'll tell you how that got settled, but not now, later on. And if you decide on arbitration is a way to settle it, then what is the procedure? You have to agree. How do we start the arbitration process? And we'll talk about that. Allocation of cost recovery. The costs that are to be recovered under the contract are to be spelled out. Remember, I told you earlier on during the course that there is an accounting procedure, it is about this thick, a book kind of thing, that is attached to the agreement, how costs are recovered through tangible costs are recovered this way, intangible costs are recovered this way. For example, the salaries are recovered one way, and the tangible costs is the building cost, if the company owns the base, is recovered another way. So all these are laid down procedure, thick book called the accounting procedure. The costs that are to be spelled out there, okay? So general provision, which I couldn't find another place, I put it under general provision. And there are many more. Who announces to the media at the time of the discovery must be spelled out in the contract. Public announcements when and what sometimes cause problems. Who announces to the media at the time of the discovery? This must be spelled out in the contract. Public announcements when and what sometimes cause problems. So let us say you're in Egypt and pick a company. Shell Oil has made a big discovery in Egypt. Everybody's happy. The company is happy, the government of Egypt, the people of Egypt. The question is, now you have to tell the world. Who should tell the world that a big discovery is taking place in Egypt? The company, Shell, or the government of Egypt? That has to be established. It's a very important point. You cannot ignore it. An exaggerated example to get the point across. When will the company establish or announce to the media that we have made a big discovery? When will Shell tell the media? I'll tell you when they will announce. Not the day of the discovery, no. They will pick the time that is suitable to Shell. I'll tell you what time is suitable. The time that is suitable to Shell is the time or the day when the chairman of Shell Oil is arriving in Wall Street in New York on his plane. When the chairman of Shell that day or 2 days is arriving in New York, Wall Street, where they get the money, raise capital, that is the time when the Shell will announce, you know, why is he going to New York? And because that's where the capital is, that's where the money is. So the chairman goes, well, look here, man. Look here, he's going to announce in New York, in Wall Street, that today we made this big, huge discovery and we want you to buy my shares so that we can benefit from the discovery. But there's a lot of oil there. That timing suits him. Does it suit the government of the president of Egypt? If it was Hosni Mubarak or the Sisi fellow now? They could not care less about that. He will announce when it suits him. Just before the election, to give the good news that because of me, look, I brought the best oil company in the world, Shell Oil, and because of them, they found the oil, and really I should get the credit because I picked the right company. Well, as an exaggerated example. So again, government has a reason, Company has a reason. So even simple things as that would cause that. As you can see, I've closed it. But however, as I was talking to you, I realized I made a promise, and when I make a promise, I keep a promise. You probably have forgotten it. Avoid over expenditures. Who should pay? Remember the story I gave you about? I said you'll have to kill me before you get money from me for spending too much money on beyond AF. You remember all that? No, about 10 minutes back we talked. And I said, I'll give you a real life example in which I was involved. So let me do that, and with that we'll say about this. That and the third type joint venture will be over. Remember this project and the story. The nuclear project which I've been talking about, the big one, this was in 1970s, it was started by Brown and Root. We, the joint venture partners, said to Brown and Root, we were four, I explained, Austin and Houston and all. How much will it cost, Mr. Brown and Root? And they said, well, it'll cost little less than $1 billion. Less than 1 billion, B. We say, good, go start. The question is, that was the AFE. When they finished the product, it was supposed to start in 81. It started construction in 70s, but the generation of power going to start in 1981 when the electricity was going to flow. The project did not finish in 1986, so it was already delayed by 5 years. And they had promised $1 billion. It'll be finished. Brown Root. No, sir. It was finished in 86, and the cost was not $1 billion, not $2 billion, not $3 billion, not $4 billion. The cost was $6.2 billion. 6.2. AF is 1. Cost is 6. Can you imagine? Am I going to pay for that? No. Their negligence, maybe. They were new. You've heard of this guy. No, it's a company you're all familiar with. It's called Halliburton today. So we went to the judge. Mr. Judge, look what they've done. $6 billion. The judge said, yes, you will pay a penalty, Mr. Brown Root, of $750 million. $750 million penalty on that company. Not the total $6 billion, because the judge said a lot of money went up beyond, cost went up because the government of America changed the rules and regulation, added much more safety requirements. So they could not, much environmental consideration. The company that's forced, they couldn't help it. They couldn't anticipate that. So I'm not going to penalize something they could not anticipate. It's the government of the United States. But for negligence, that part, $750 million worth of negligence. So we saved that much, but they had to pay for it. Okay, so I kept my promise. The second promise I'm going to make to you is, I'm being generous, let's take a 12-minute break. 12 minutes from now, I'll come up with a number fourth kind of an agreement. I can continue, but I think you're tired. And so on. We've already done, we've done concession, PSA, joint ventures, and then the question, the fourth kind of agreement comes after, oh, well, I'll give you an extra minute, 13 minutes, okay, 13. You're getting closer to the spring break. Boy, you're just a few minutes left now. Have a great time, but I'm coming back here first before you start the great time, okay? 13 minutes from now. Okay, we have finished 3 kinds of contract types. And the 4th one is service contract. A service contract is a service contract. There's nothing else I can say. A service contract is a service contract, that's all. The company provides a service and they get paid for it. That's all. For example, if Chevron, if you have a service, if you have a driver, a chauffeur, and at the end of the month you pay him $500, that means you have a service contract with the driver or the chauffeur. He provides you a service, give him $500. That's it. Same way. Same thing. Now, an oil company is hired by the government to provide a service. The company provides a service and that get paid for it. How you get paid? Depending on different circumstances, you can get, the company can pay it on and dollars per barrel produced. Different kind of arrangement can be made. The government might say, well, you produce 100 barrels, we'll give you $5 per barrel. For production, we'll give you $500 or $5,000, $5 million, depending on how much you produce and what the arrangement we have with you on per barrel produced rate. So that's all. For example, Aramco. Most everybody has heard about Aramco, one of the biggest producers of oil in the world. They produce oil in Saudi Arabia. When Aramco started long ago, originally, long ago, it was a joint venture called Aramco. Aramco stands for Arabian American Oil Company, Aramco. The oil, made up of 4 American companies. There was Chevron, Mobil Oil, Texaco, and Chevron, Mobil Oil, Exxon. Exxon, Mobil Oil, Chevron, Texaco. Easy to remember. When it started long ago, these four companies came together, got together, and each company had a 1/4 working interest. Each company has 25% working interest in Aramco. And collectively, the joint venture called itself Aramco. This joint venture, well, many, many years back, decades ago, went to Saudi Arabia. And then they had a contract originally, which was based on a concession kind of an agreement. The original contract was a concession based on royalty. No, Aramco partners put up all the money, brought in all the expertise, and if they produced, which they did produce a lot of oil, and they paid the government some royalty. That was the agreement. Subsequently, that agreement has evolved over the years. And Aramco is now what I would say is a national company, because Saudi Aramco, there's now Exxon and Chevron there. It's not a joint venture anymore. It is a Saudi oil company, not national oil company, you can call it, called Saudi Aramco. It's now called Saudi Aramco. And the others who come in, even the employees, not the Saudi employees. I don't think so. I don't know what the contracts have with Saudi. They serve Saudi Aramco, obviously, Saudi, as service contractors. Okay, whereas the original was a concession, and the employees were of Chevron, Exxon, they're all working there. I had some friends working there. They were employed here. There's a UT graduate, both husband and wife team. In 1971, when I arrived, he was there. He got his PhD, Ali Dogru, very famous, very senior fellow in Aramco, Saudi Aramco, very senior. I believe he's retired now. And his wife also a PhD from our department, Sivke. And they were, I know Ali was an employee of Mobil at that time, Mobil Oil. Mobil is now part of Exxon. And then he went to Saudi Arabia and stayed there, but stayed to be a Mobil employee. Now, I think, you could ask Ali if you want to, I think then at some point he was given the option whether you can continue to stay here as Saudi, as an employee of Saudi Aramco, or you go back to Dallas. It was, I think Mobil was in Dallas at the time, and continued to serve there. I think, for a fact, he chose to stay in Saudi Arabia and serve with Aramco, the Saudi Aramco. Okay? Yes, some of them opted to come back, some did not. So today it is the national company, and if you can go work there as an engineer, but more under some service contract arrangements, paid by barrel or whatever arrangements. Incidentally, all contracts, all of them, in Iraq are service contract with foreign oil companies, all of them. Iraqis have offered service contract. And no concession, and so on. So that's the fourth kind of agreement, a service contract. Very simple, easy to explain. So I had promised to you at the beginning of part 2, the 4 kinds of agreements: concession, PSA, and we have looked at the cash flow. And then you have also the handout for the joint operating agreement. Make sure it is with you when you turn on this lecture and go through over it with me as I lectured for the last over 1 hour on joint ventures. And finally, we looked at number 4, service contract. I have fulfilled my promise to you with some strange conclusion that all that I've taught you on the four kind of, nowhere in the world are you going to find these contracts. Nowhere. Obviously, you're not going to be happy to hear that. How come, Dr. Malik? You wasted a time. You kept talking and talking, and we kept listening to you patiently and taking notes wherever we could and did. And now at the end, you reveal the big secret that after we're done, it's no use, nowhere do they have these kind of contracts. Then what do they have? I'll reveal that secret now. The contract type that you see prevalent, prevailing around the world is called, there's not name, but it's a hybrid kind. Hybrid. Let me write down hybrid. That's not, you can call it number 5, but it's just, I'll tell you what it is. Then you can give it another number or whatever you want to do. You can call it number 5. Write it down. Combination, amalgamation, cocktail, mixture. All these 4 words, combination, amalgamation, cocktail, mixture, mean the same thing. They're hybrid. Same thing. I've given you 4 different words to say the same thing. Mixture, I think, combination, amalgamation. And if you're the drinking kind, cocktail. I have no idea what in the world is that, but they say it's a mixture of different drinks. I've never taken a sip of drink in my life, and I'm the happiest soul you ever saw. I have no idea, none whatsoever, why people drink. You couldn't find a soul happier than I am with a drop of mixture, whatever they do, alcohol in my body. I'm not saying you should or should not drink. That's what I'm telling you about myself. I don't believe in being dependent on anything. That's philosophical. Why others do it, that's not my business. As long as they don't get carried away and have an accident and kill somebody, that becomes the state business, not mine either. It's a government business to kill somebody. Having done, take it out. Let's get back to what's hybrid or combination mixture. That's what you see in many countries. They look at the 4 different kinds of agreements types that I've spent 2 days talking about, and they take one aspect of one agreement type and combine it with another aspect of another agreement type, and they said, well, we combine this type with this type of agreement, this aspect of this and this aspect, and together we'll make our own little concoction or cocktail, if you want to call it. If not clear, don't worry, I'm going to explain it to you with the help of an example. And for that, let's step outside and take a flight to China. Okay, so I'm going to give you an outline of a Chinese contract. You're not going to be experts. They just to explain to you what is hybrid. Okay, let's do it. This is an example I used to explain a hybrid agreement. Let us say in China, the company produces 100 barrel or $100 worth of oil, 100, simply arithmetic. The government of China says, the part of the agreement, first company, give us 17.5% royalty. 17.5% pure and simple royalty the government demands. This is how they come up with 12.5% is pure and simple royalty, as I've explained to you. There's a 5% that is called CICT. You want to know what is called CICT, consolidated commercial consolidated commercial and industrial tax. This is, as I said, 5%. Call it what you will. CICT or whatever you want to call it, it's just another thing what I call is royalty. So with a different name, let's say. So together, 12.5% pure simple royalty, 5% CICT, which is another name for, I call it for royalty. At the end of the day, the money is coming out of the pocket of the oil company. So the total comes to how much? 17.5%. Based on royalty. But royalty, as you know from the definition, goes to the government first. What do you call the agreement type? What do you call it? that is based on royalty. You call it a concession. Here you have the making of a concession type of an agreement. Story has not ended yet. After taking a royalty of 17.5%, now this is 82.5 in case you can't see it, you're left with 82.5%. 82.5% is remaining. Here the government says to the company, from this amount, take out the cost. Oh, something wrong with this. Don't declare and or don't show them. Take out the certain amount called cost oil. Take out the from 82.5%, you take out an amount that cost you to produce all this, and we call it what? Cost oil. Simple. After taking out the cost oil, you're left with I don't have that much. Let me see if I got another black pen that can write better because there's no more ink left in this. So after taking out the cost oil, we're left with profit oil. The problem is you can't get these, they're all chiseled. I found a place where I could get these are different from this one, they look the same. Chiseled when they cut like this at the end, and they only had 3 or 4 packages. I took all of them. So now I have to use this one, which I don't like. Forget what I said, talk about this. 82.5% is left after taking royalty. Now there's a concession. From the 82.5%, government says, now take out the cost of whatever cost you call cost oil. What is left? It profit oil, of course. You'll tell me that. This profit oil this Blue is run its course, there's nothing left in the blue. This is a different blue from that. Let me see if I can. That's frustrating. I would love to go and buy 10 of these, but they're just not available. I hope this has some life left. I hope so. So please bear with me. Bear with me, please. And as it is, I'm frustrated myself because I'll have to go and see if I can get before the next lecture. You think you can see that better? Oh yeah, thank God you can see that better. The profit oil is divided into IOCs, International Oil Company, and the government. Having said that, now, what do you call an agreement type? What do you call the type of agreement that is made up of cost oil and profit oil? That is called a PSA, production sharing agreement, or PSC, production sharing contract. So that agreement type way up there is a PSA. Here you have a concession. Sorry for all this mess with the color. I hope you can make sense of what I'm saying. So very simple. $100 is total production. The government first gets the royalty of 12.5% and 5%. I've explained all that, CICT, and total is 17.5% royalty. Then when you have royalty in agreement, it's called a concession. Okay, then we have what is left is 82.5% over there. That is called the profit oil. Okay, that's it. We don't know. No. Profit oil, from the profit oil, the government takes cost oil, take out the cost. What is left is profit oil. From 82.5, you recover your cost. What is left is profit oil. And the profit oil is divided now between IOC and the government. This, when the situation in agreement, where you have a cost oil and profit oil, it's called a PSA. Maybe very simple thing that should be explained in 3 minutes, but I've taken practically 10 minutes to make sure you understand it. No, just look at it. It's so straightforward. So it's just, it should take no more than 3 minutes to follow the logic. So here in the case of China, the agreement is made up of what? Concession and a PSA. Combination of a concession and a PSA. Mixture of a concession and a PSA. Perfectly good example. Having said that, this is what we see around the globe. Countries are taking one aspect of a concession, as an example only, and combining it with another aspect of a PSA. Or it could be a joint venture and a concession, or a PSA. So you can have all kinds of combination. In this case, just the combination is so easy to explain of a concession and a PSA. I hope that is clear. And I'm sure you folks are anxious and say, well, so this is clear. Tell us, when are we going home now to start our spring break? And the answer is right now. Your spring break starts. Have a wonderful time. Please be safe. No accidents. Please be safe. Stay away from this COVID business. No matter what stage they talk about, 2, 3, or 4, I personally don't care. I care what stage I should be in my own mind. and stay away with the mask and put on the mask. I'm not saying you should. And it's another thing. Well, can you? I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. You can just do whatever you want to do. Wear it, not wear it. That's you're grown up. You should. But I would. I'm the one who likes to be secure. Okay. Anyway, good time. Have a wonderful time. I'll see you when you're back. And